Broadcasting from Baltimore, Maryland, this is 5x3 Radio, where strength is for everyone. I'm your host, Emily Sokolinski, owner of 5x3 Training, a strength and conditioning gym in Baltimore, along with my co-host, Rebecca Fishburne, founder of Cornerstone Strength Maryland. Each week, Rebecca and I will discuss the ins and outs of strength training, why there is a no one-size-fits-all approach, and why strength is so important in our daily lives. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now, on with the show. Where do we want to go with part two of this podcast?
Well, we ended last time, and Diego had posed two questions that he thought were still remaining. Mm-hmm. One was the question of, is strength the most important thing?
Right.
You know, in quotation marks, the most important thing.
That's the most important thing.
But then also, I had to look the word up, the epistemological question of how we know what we think we know. So
right.
how
that is the definition of epistemology.
Yeah, I know. It's a great word. I'm using it all the time this week, Diego.
I can't pronounce it, so kudos to you.
But like Diego was saying before, how do you cut through the bullshit, right? Like, how do you determine of all of the sales pitches, right? And there's going to be some validity to all of the sales pitches, to all of the approaches. How do you determine which one is true, the most true, which one is like utter nonsense,
right?
That sort of thing.
How do you sift through everything and find what's going to work for you? What's the right fit for you, and what does that mean, the right fit for you? You know, how do you even know that?
And then we got some follow-up from our listener.
Yes.
Well, you also
along the lines of, is strength the most important thing?
What'd you say?
I was pointing at Emily because Emily was also had all this stuff about the very last paragraph. You know, do you periodize? How do you reassess goals? What does success look like?
Right.
All that stuff. Emily still has questions or thoughts about.
Oh, I do.
Well, you did last time. You said that, all that stuff we were going to talk about.
Yeah. But then we have this. Now we have a new email. We have a new,
Yeah, I don't know that the new email adds that much, honestly. I mean, other than his opinion,
right,
which is fine.
Right.
But he asked for ours.
Right. So let's. I think we just start this. We have to pick somewhere to start because there's still a lot here. So we don't want to bombard everybody with, too much. We also don't want to get confused ourselves.
Yeah. Well, is strength the most important thing? Is a form of, I am trying to sell you something. So your new favorite word, the epistemological question comes first, because that's how you're supposed to ascertain the truth value of the statement. Strength is the most important thing, right? That is an application of the bigger question. So, perhaps,
and probably more specifically, strength is the most important physical adaptation, because there's other things like love.
Sure. Yes. Yes. The strong force, the gravity, things like that are more important.
Yeah. Well.
So do you need to do your kickoff?
Oh, I can do my kickoff. Hi, everybody. We're here again, obviously, because I'm going to keep all this and as a lead in. We're back for part two of our podcast from about 2 weeks ago. We had a listener's question from Minnesota, and we spent quite a bit of time discussing, where do you begin? I mean, what's the step? I think we're focusing primarily on weight loss, and somebody who comes to exercise or a program for the first time. Do they start with weight loss? Do they start with an exercise program? Where do they begin their journey? So we spoke, I think, and you can remind me, that we all decided, I think, starting some type of exercise program, some type of resistance program is probably a good beginning. Get that going, whether that's, going to the gym and doing some type of circuit. It doesn't have to be with a barbell. It can just be anything to kind of kick off a consistent program of moving, of getting moving, of primarily, hopefully, doing some weights to preserve the muscle mass that we have as we decide we want to start to lose weight. And then after that's become a consistent part of our life, a routine becomes a lifestyle change. Now we can start to focus on nutrition, and we probably have already started. Most people have already started to eat better, even during that time. So that was kind of part one of it. But then there's a whole additional other questions to the first email, because we did receive a second email as a follow-up to our podcast from our listener, who was quite humbled that we took up the time to talk about this. But it's a good discussion. And interestingly enough, on the Facebook page, I saw a very, very simple question about that. I weigh this much. Where do I start? What do I do? And I said, hey, listen to the podcast. See if this can help you. So the second part of the first email was about what's the most important thing for an untrained middle-aged person. And I think it was more, is strength the most important thing? Kind of was what he's going for. And how often do you adjust and reassess these goals once you've begun? And what does success look like? So there are a couple different, obviously, questions and subjects within those three questions. So we thought we'd kind of use this time to go into that detail about that. And, what is the most important thing to start with? And what does success look like when you've started X, Y, or Z? So do you, Diego or Rebecca, want to start off with that? Because I know, Diego, you had thoughts about this. Or Rebecca, maybe I'll just kind of open the door to either one of you. Where do we go with this second subject?
Diego's jumping.
Diego's waving his hand.
Why don't you go ahead then, Diego?
Why don't we start with the question that the original email post is, and I'm quoting now. It says, "What I'm saying is this: if a smart guy like me with 2 biochemistry degrees and a doctorate can get that batshit lost, what the heck does your average untrained person do?" Right. So the caller here, the emailer here, is posing an interesting question. How do we know where to start? And there's a marketplace of ideas out there, right? There are people who are trying to either convince you or sell you a product that purportedly addresses your needs. And you, as a consumer in that marketplace of ideas, are left with the question of how do you decide which product? You have limited resources, right? Limited time, limited money, if there's a cost associated with what they're offering. You're left with the question of how to decide which ones of those to go with, right? As a reminder, this particular person had done some yoga, had done some boot camp type exercising, and then had moved on to lifting some barbells. So he had tried a few different of these options. I don't know what method he used to decide on those. Sometimes it's just availability, right? Sometimes there's a gym that's nearby and you go and you do what they offer, and that's fine. But now with the advent of the internet and the online coaching marketplace and all that other stuff, I think that you have to contend with a wider range of offerings, all of which are very seductively presented, right? Which makes it complicated for somebody who doesn't have much background. Particularly, this is exactly what we're talking about, a person who is new to exercise. By definition, they don't really have much background in the field, and they're faced with making a decision sometimes between rather incompatible claims that are vying for their attention or money. So this is what I, last time, much to Rebecca's amusement, call the epistemological question, because really you're trying to, the question is, how do you determine what method do you use to determine the truth value of the claim that these people trying to sell you something or convince you to do something how do you go about determining the truth value of those statements? So if I say to you, all you have to do is lift weights and that'll solve all your problems. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a statement that I'm making, which may be true or may be false. How do you, as an uninformed consumer of fitness, go about deciding whether that's true or false? Likewise, I could say, well, the most important thing you got to do is get your cardiovascular fitness up. So don't worry about lifting weights. You just need to get your cardio. And I can make, I can, or the person trying to sell you this can make a rational, convincing argument for either one of those, right? And we've heard them both, and we can reproduce them if necessary. So it can be tricky. I think it can be very tricky. And we've all made mistakes in this ourselves. So I'm not speaking here from a position of, I know all the answers. I've made mistakes too. We've all made mistakes. But I think that there's a few things, and this is not just fitness related. This is related to every field of human endeavor. But there's a few things to pay attention, right? When somebody's trying to convince you of something, there's some patterns, right? So there's usually some sort of personal or anecdotal evidence that is brought into bear, right? And the reason it's personal, I think, is because personal accounts are emotionally more powerful than statistical accounts, right? Statistical accounts for most people have no meaning, and they're completely, people's eyes glaze over when you talk about statistics or studies or meta-analyses or whatever the case might be. Whereas personal accounts or, family member this, my friend did that. That's why people tend to, I think, put more weight on what so-and-so said at the hair salon than on what expert so-and-so said in a learned publication. Because I can relate emotionally to one of them, but it's very hard to relate emotionally to the other one. So I think most of these things will have a component of a personal anecdote with an emotional tie. And most of them will have a plausible mechanism. And I think Rebecca was talking about that one before we started, right? There'll be a plausible mechanism. So we're talking about strength. Well, strength is obviously I'm doing the most important thing here, the plausible mechanism. The strength is obviously the most important things because that's how we interact with the outside world. If we can't move, we can't interact with the world. And if I can't interact with the world, well, good am I? Right. So obviously strength, since strength is the production of force against the external world, clearly strength is the most important thing. End of reasoning, right? That's a very compelling argument. That there's a mechanism. The mechanism is reasonable. Sure, yes, I have to move. I have to interact with the outside world. What's the alternative? Being a quadriplegic? That's bad. Well, therefore, strength is the most important thing. Likewise, I could say, well, cardiovascular health is the most important thing. You don't want to keel over from a heart attack, right? So obviously, we want cardiovascular health is very important. The metabolic health is the most important thing. Muscles feed off of metabolism. If my metabolism doesn't work, my muscles won't operate. I cannot interact with the outside world. Well, metabolism is obviously the most important thing, right?
You can see why people would be confused as to what to do.
All hail ATP, right? It's so all of the, I don't know about all, but most of the claims that you will hear will have this type of shape. There will be a purported mechanism, which is reasonable and may in fact be partially correct or true. There will be some anecdotal evidence and some appeal to intuition and some emotional appeal built into it. And that's usually enough to get people on board, right? That's all it takes. And then if you're clever with marketing and you tie that with, a limited time promotion, or you have no time to waste, or blah, 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 then that's it. You got a sale. So I've been talking for 5 minutes, but I guess what I'm trying to say is we should think of these things, even if there's no money at stake, right? There is a resource at stake, which is your time. So you're paying with your time when you're going to do one of these things. You have limited time, so you have to pick which one you're going to do. And you're going to be offered things in this form, in the form of seductive anecdote with emotional appeal, plausible mechanism, that usually leading to, and this I think is the key distinguishing factor that we can use to to weed some of these things out. Usually this leads to, and therefore, the thing that I am offering you is the best thing for you to do, is the optimal thing. Emily knows I have hives when I talk about the word optimal, right? As a trained mathematician, optimal has a very specific meaning. People throw that word around, meaning really, really good or something like that. But that's not what it means. So I think that the conclusion of the mechanistic, anecdotal, emotional appeal is, hey, I have the optimal solution given these things, and you should do this. And that's, I think, where your detector should go up, right? Your tingly, your spidey sense should start tingling. Because if we know anything from the non-emotional side, if we know anything from the statistical side of health, strength and conditioning, whatever it is that the answers are hardly ever clear. There's hardly ever a definitive best practice.
Right.
Almost always the results are muddled. And most often some combination of things ends up being better than one thing alone.
Right.
So my spidey sense tingles when somebody is trying to convince me that one aspect is so overwhelmingly important that it trumps all other aspects. And therefore, you should ignore all other aspects and just do this. That's obviously not a foolproof detector. There may very well be cases where one aspect really does trump all other aspects, and you really should take care of that one. But I think that in combination with that typical sales strategy that we just described makes my spidey sense tingle. And that's how I would start trying to separate the wheat from the chaff.
So
what do you think?
I think like what you're saying in relation to the question, like, is strength the most important thing? Where we all landed the last time is if you're starting out, if you're just beginning, strength is a very important place to start, but there's no one absolute right answer, even at the beginning, but especially as one progresses. And watch out for your spidey senses going off, understanding when, you're being sold something, even if it's just a program that's going to take your time, if not your money. Yeah.
I was listening to that and thinking of, so this person is a doctor. And when you go to the doctor, when the doctor tells you, all right, you need to do this, and just get some exercise. And that's what you walk away with. Go exercise. Or they'll say, go get on the treadmill or go for a run. People walk out of the doctor's office. They have no clue what to do. My doctor told me I need to get more exercise. What does that mean? The doctor doesn't know it either. You have somebody who doesn't know what kind of prescription to give you in that sense, because they don't know. That's this person, right? Somebody who has 2 biochemistry degrees and is a doctorate. What do you tell somebody? Now, some of that's maybe liability purposes. They can't kind of say, go run, because if the person goes running and then breaks their leg, let's say running, they're going to come back and tell me to go run and I broke my leg. So there's this kind of like, quote unquote, just go exercise. Well, what does that mean? So the person is left up to their own devices. My doctor told me to come exercise. They go to the gym. I have to exercise. Where do I start? And this goes back to what you were saying, Diego, right? I don't know where to start and what's the best thing. And if I'm sold something that they're telling me is right, and I don't know any better, then I'm just going to go ahead and follow your advice. And who knows where that leads me. Some people just end up stopping. It just becomes too hard for them to keep up with that. Let's say that program that the person's put them on, if they're working with a trainer. So people are constantly trying new things. I think that's an issue too. Like this, like our listener, trying the yoga, doing a boot camp, doing barbells. Where do you start? You don't even know where to start from where the doctor is saying to start, because he or she doesn't know where you start. And now you walk into a gym and there's 1,000 things for you to do and you're lost. So I mean, it's a jumble right here. I'm hearing myself talk and I don't know what to say. I don't know.
I think it's absolutely true that doctors there's a vacuum left by the fact that doctors are not necessarily well trained
right
in exercise.
Certain doctors.
So that
right?
leaves a vacuum.
Certain, yeah.
We all know doctors who would give you a barbell prescription, right?
Sure.
Like celery, like a doctor who has no vested interest in it is going to, which I think kind of gets back to one of the topics that we covered before, though. Like, is the most important thing strength, cardio, or is it consistency? Like, maybe it's left wide open because the doctor is like giving you space to figure out what works for you, what's going to keep you motivated, what's going to keep you moving. Like, I mean, obviously we talked about this the last time, and if a person can incorporate resistance training, maintain muscle mass, they're going to have metabolic improvements as a result of that as well. That is going to aid in the loss of the proposed like 50 to 70 pounds, like the hypothetical weight loss. But if a person's consistent doing whatever they're doing, is that better than starting something, stopping something, starting something different, feeling discouraged? Like,
I mean, I feel it's the
maybe consistency.
I think it's the consistency. I mean, I think that I would say it doesn't matter where you start in the beginning. You just stick with something. You start with something. Most people will start. I think I spoke about this in the last one about, when you see transformational videos or, transformational pieces, the person started walking. They walked a block, then they walked 2 blocks, then they walked a mile. Then they decided to go to a gym. They felt a little bit more confident about that they were exercising. Now they can take that step and walk into a gym and just do the machines. And maybe the machines turn into wanting to take a class, and that turns into seeing someone with a kettlebell or a dumbbell or a bar, whatever it is. I mean, it's kind of like you start wherever you start. I think you're right. I think consistency is the key. Having somebody kind of guide you is important, but who's the right person to guide you? That's what it goes back to. Who do you turn to?
Here's the thing. I think from the perspective of the physician, their goal is not to make you jacked and a power lifter. That is not their goal. So when they tell you go get some exercise, I think they're speaking from a public health perspective. And from a public health perspective, the literature is, as unclear as it is fairly clear that a variety of exercise interventions are effective at getting you to a point where you're not at a statistical risk, statistically elevated risk of death, over the general population. So I believe that's what the doctor is trying to accomplish. We have to understand that there's a difference between a mechanic and a race car driver.
Right.
They have different goals. The mechanic's goal is to get the car to perform to its spec. The race car driver's goal is to make the car go as fast as possible around the track. And then there are specialized mechanics who deal with race car drivers' cars. Those are strength coaches in this context. I don't think that the physician is particularly concerned with race driving or with strength coaches. I think the physician is primarily concerned with lowering your statistical risk of dying of all causes. So when they tell you go get some exercise, yes, we can make fun of that, but it's really not that stupid a statement. Oh. Really what they should probably be doing is referring that person to somebody who can turn that into a specific prescription.
Right.
The way that we discussed last time.
Right. And that's what they should happen. That's ideal. That's somebody who isn't just, I don't know, I feel like blowing you off. Go get some exercise. And then you're left with, well, what do I do? I've never done anything before in my life. Where do I start? I don't know. Go for a walk. Okay. So that's what I mean. I mean, it's you want to have a little bit more guidance and as to here's somebody you could contact who may be able to help get you started. And you may not stay with that person, but that might lead to, to something else. But that blatant just, go do this. doesn't offer the person much at all. And then you end up with what does the untrained person do? Where do you start? I think
Yeah, that's the equivalent of you being overweight and somebody telling you, well, eat less food.
Right.
That should do it.
Right.
Yes, that is true.
And
that will do it. But the problem is not that you don't know that that's what you need to do. The problem is that you don't know how to put that into practice effectively.
Right.
Same thing with exercise. The doctor is telling you what needs to happen. You need to get some exercise. And honestly, from a public health perspective, it doesn't really matter which one.
And they do the same thing.
But you, as a consumer, you don't know where to do that.
But the doctor says the same thing about weight loss too. I mean, how many times do I hear from clients? Yes. My doctor told me I need to lose weight.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
And what do? I don't know.
It's a non-specific recommendation that is correct, but not actionable. It's hard to put it into practice. So really, a referral to a nutritionist or a fitness specialist or whatever would make much more sense. I just don't think that that's the way the American healthcare system is structured.
Right.
I
think even though there is a lot, there's a lot out there, and you can get lost among this, as he's saying, as we were saying, there's this person trying to sell you that, this person trying to sell you this. At least I find that nowadays more and more readings out there, or articles, whatever, is about resistance training. That you can't look at the news, scroll through the news or read a paper where there isn't an article about, add resistance training into your program. That may not have been there that years ago, right? Mm-hmm. It was running. Now it's resistance. So there is that. I think that is something that definitely is that people are listening to. You can see the gyms have changed a lot, and the type of equipment that they have. Many of the commercial gyms, have started to invest more into barbells, bumpers, because they're realizing that's what people are either they're turning towards because of like CrossFit, people, CrossFit becoming popular. You still have the boot camps, but even in the boot camps, there's still the emphasis on dumbbells or kettlebells. So there is that resistance training side. It's not just pure aerobics classes anymore. Nobody just does aerobics. Well, I mean, maybe Zumba, but that's Zumba. There's no just regular old aerobics classes from like the 80s. There's more to it. So there is that. But then how do you sift through that? I think whether it's barbells, dumbbells, kettlebells, just start somewhere. Pick something. Start with the dumbbell. Then try to find somebody who can help with a barbell, or start yourself. I think there is information out there. You still have to sift through a lot of it, but at least that's a recurring theme that wasn't there before.
So I guess the way I'm reading this question now, especially with the follow-up email, right? Like, so we're talking at this point, hypothetically, about somebody who is starting from like baseline, sitting on the sofa, fast food for all meals, right? And the doctor says, get some exercise, right? But like you get beyond that and you get someone who has bought into the notion that strength is where you start. And that's what they've done. And they've actually landed on barbells, and they've been doing barbell training. But where do you go from there? You've done your NLP. You've had a good start with your NLP. And now you're getting, for instance, like the messaging from Starting Strength, strength is the most important adaptation. You need to continue to build more strength, right? Your 300-pound deadlift, that's great. You would really be a better human if you had a 500-pound deadlift, though. So keep adding weight.
Okay, so before we even continue, let's address that.
Right.
So first tell me, do you think that a 500-pound deadlift would be better for this person than a 300-pound deadlift?
Do I think that? No.
Yeah, you.
No, I think you get to a certain point, right, where your basic strength needs are met, and you then kind of decide what makes you happy from there. Like, is it like if you just maintaining a level of strength that makes your life easier, that allows you to experience some PRs in the gym if that excites you, that allows you to easily go out and, play with your kids or do activities while you're on vacation or do things in your life that you enjoy that are easier to do because you have a certain base level of strength. Like, I think you build that base level of strength, and then there is this message like more strength is always better. A 500-pound deadlift is always better than a 200-pound deadlift, or that sort of thinking. But I don't think that.
But where does that come from?
That doesn't make me happy.
Yeah, but where does that come from? What's the argument for that?
What do you mean? What's the argument for that?
If you're trying to convince me to invest my time and effort to get my deadlift from 3 to 5, you're going to have to tell me some reason why that's better.
Yeah, you got to answer the why.
5 is bigger than 3, but so what?
Yeah, I haven't ever for myself been able to answer the why of that in a satisfactory manner that would cause me to do the things that I might need to do to get that exceptionally much heavier deadlift.
Yeah.
I
I don't see where the argument comes from. I thought maybe you had a good answer for it.
I don't talk.
No, but I feel like there's a lot of places where that's the messaging, like a weekend seminar, right? Like, or any of the Facebook or social media pages that are sort of associated, or even just like the fact that humans are competitive by nature, and this is, a competitive sport. And I mean, like, I do admire.
Well, sure, Johnson. If you're a competitive sport, yeah. If you're a powerlifter,
but I don't want to do that.
If you're a powerlifter, of course, a bigger deadlift is better. That's unquestionable. Unless that makes your squat or bench go down a lot. But we're assuming we're not talking about powerlifters here. And I always hear this as, all things being equal, stronger is better. Sure, but all things are never equal. It takes progressively more effort to get stronger, right? So your investment is getting higher and higher for diminishing returns.
I'm sorry.
So you have to make a increasingly compelling argument that the additional strength is worth it. The only basis that I've ever seen that is reasonably rational is people quoting the 2008 British Medical Journal study, which is usually quoted as stronger people are harder to kill, because that study shows that when you stratify the people in the study in lowest, middle, and top third, the mortality, all-cause mortality, is lowest in the strongest group, middle in the middle, and highest in the low. But that's what you get if you read the abstract of the paper. Mm-hmm. If you actually read the actual paper, you get a few things out of it, which I think in summary can be stated as, it's really bad to be very weak. It doesn't really say it's really good to be very strong. Mm-hmm. First thing is, if you look at the paper and you look at how they tested strength and all that other stuff, the top third group is not strong. Like the way they measured strength and the way they divided it, it doesn't tell you that those people are strong. They're just the top third of the group, but they're not particularly strong. It doesn't, I guess, in other words, it doesn't take much to get into that group in terms of training. You don't even have to finish a novice linear progression to get into that top group. And second, if you look at the mortality rate in those groups, it was really bad to be in the bottom group. It was fine to be in the middle, and it was a little bit better to be in the top third. So really what you're saying is, even in a group of people who's not very strong, the differential improvement over the people who are averagely strong is pretty small. So really all it's saying is, don't be very weak. So right. I find that to be a rather, pun intended, weak argument for being very, very strong. That does not argue for a 500-pound deadlift over a 300-pound deadlift. You could get into that top group well before a 300-pound deadlift.
Yeah, which kind of,
and that's the only argument that's the only quote unquote sound basis that I have ever seen for this argument.
Yeah.
And like you see a lot often too, like the corollary to that in terms of money, right? Like if a person has money, their life is going to be a little bit happier, but the degree to which they experience happiness once they hit like extremely wealthy versus just needs being met and a little bit extra is not as, astronomically different as we like to imagine it is.
That's why I like at the end of our listener's second email to us, I'm going to have to paraphrase this a little bit, but where I think what we're talking about, where it falls short, what to do after the start. Like once you've gotten, once you started and you start training and you're lifting, you've made some good strides and you've gained some strength and you've put some weight on the bar. Okay. Now what do you do? Is that goal? Is it still, you have to just keep pushing in and day out and suffering too much to get to like whatever that number is that you're supposed to reach? Because, it's better to be, again, 100 pounds, to have that deadlift 100 pounds more than, really what your body can honestly, and your life can do. I like it says, I think these people are lost, but it's obviously not for me to say. I tell people all the time, especially with trying to work with dancers, I'm not going to tell a dancer they're going to have to get a 500-pound deadlift to be strong. I wouldn't get them. They would never come to me. I want them to be stronger for their art. And I believe that what I can do for them and what they can do for themselves is, as they start to train, they're not as weak as they were, a month ago or 2 months ago. And they're going to be better at their art. That's just for anybody, dancer aside. I don't have a number. I don't tell people what number they should have. When people ask me, I have no clue. No clue. I want you just to see if you can do a little bit more from the week before. And that's how you keep people. I think that's how you keep people. That's how you keep people engaged in what they're doing and enjoying what they're doing. Because this should be enjoyment that, they see improvements, not just in the weight, but just see improvements in their movement and how they're moving, how much something is better. It's easier as the weight gets heavier, figuring out something else with their technique, fine tuning something else, as I was working on today with somebody. So yeah, I don't agree. Is a 500-pound deadlift better than a 300-pound deadlift? If you can deadlift 500 pounds, good for you. That's great.
I think once you hit a point of diminishing returns,
yeah,
right? Like there's a clear answer maybe at the beginning that strength, like the middle or the top third is better off than the bottom third in the 2008 study that you're talking about. Like once you get past that place where it's clear, but then in that case, it's clear because it's your own experience then, right? Like how often do you work with people who in the first couple of months say, oh my gosh, I have a runner now, my running uphill, especially so much better. Like she never had glutes and hamstrings developed to the point that she does now since she's deadlifting, so like the thing she loves to do is easier for her to do. People saying, I travel a lot with work. It's so much easier to stow my luggage in the overhead compartment, or so much more energy trying to keep up with my kids. Like there's a point where that's very clear and real in a person's life. And then when you get to the point where that doesn't become self-evident to a person and you have to do a harder sale, and like Diego's like asking me, for you, did you ever find a reason why you had to have the heavier? No, there wasn't really a reason for me personally that was compelling enough to do all the things I needed to do to make that happen. So
not unless you were a powerlifter. Jen Thompson. I follow Jen Thompson. She's ever around now.
She's fun to follow.
She's constantly chasing PRs, but that's her, and that's not her job. She's is she still a teacher? Is she still teaching? But she's a powerlifter. That's her second career. So of course she has to make more progress, and she's constantly chasing a PR. She wants to be stronger on the bench. She wants to get her deadlift up. She wants her squat back to where it was prior to her, that hip, in surgery she had for her hip. But we're not training powerlifters. Those people are not who we're training, right? That's not who this person is. The untrained person. That's not that person. So yes, in that case, that's their goal. The goals here should be different. They have to.
Here's an analogy. that I think it's going to sound stupid and ridiculous, which is going to illustrate something. You've talked in the podcast about preparing food and that kind of stuff. So I do food prep for us, right? I'll cook certain things and I'll prepare certain things ahead of time. So I have gotten myself to a point, let's think about this as a progression, to a point where I can prepare certain foods and things with a certain degree of efficiency and tastefulness and whatever other qualities, and that supports our lifestyle and our nutritional needs.
Right.
Now, should I continue getting better at making food? Should I strive to be a Michelin star chef? Would that make it better for us? Would that improve our lifestyle and our nutritional?
Diego, I'm completely re-envisioning 5x3 now.
Yes.
Like get rid of half the turf and just
add,
put
put a grill,
a gourmet kitchen over there.
Yeah. But I think it's a reasonable analogy, right? I've gotten myself to a point where my food prep skills and time investment and whatever else is involved supports what I want out of it. And I really don't have any incentive at this point to improve my cooking and my food prep.
No.
The what's going to add to my life is not enough to offset the extra effort. And that's it. I don't think it's a reasonable question to ask, what should I do once I get my food prep leveled up to what I need to support my goals? I don't think it's reasonable. So I think it's equally unreasonable to ask, what should I do once I get my fitness goals to the point that they're enough to support a healthy lifestyle?
Right.
Once you get past that point, it's purely a matter of personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to make better quality food or spend more time doing that because I enjoy it or because the extra palatability is worth the extra effort, well, then great. That's a personal choice, a personal preference.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with training.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about an untrained person, getting them to a point where they're healthy, fit enough to do their activities of daily living and maybe a little bit extra, you got some headroom there. After that, it's purely a matter of personal preference. And who am I to tell you what you should prefer? If you prefer chasing deadlift PRs, more power to you. If you prefer keeping your deadlift where it is and reducing your 5K time, more power to you as well. I mean, your fitness goals are your fitness goals.
Right.
I don't think it makes sense for us to tell people what they should want to do.
Right.
Yeah. And it's fine for the goals to change over time and change
Absolutely.
based on seasons.
Absolutely.
And you could have like a food prep PR if you were going to host a dinner party or something like that, but
Sure.
doesn't mean.
Yeah, I think I'm reading the email, the second email about goalposts. I think he thinks the goalpost, the listener needs to move, but then where do you put them, and how far away are they, and what direction? And I think it's fine to have goals. It's good to have goals. It's good, but you don't. But your goals should be, your goals, and we don't try to push our clients, to what we think they should, or that we think they should be. My goal, my job is to listen to that person and help him or her reach that place in their life. If they want to keep hitting PRs, we're going to help them. If that's important to them, great. If it's more just, they're really satisfied with where they are. They don't have a lot of time right now. Their schedule has to change a bit. Well, then the program has to change with them, and that's okay too. Right. So goals, the goalpost can move, but it doesn't, I don't think it has to move in any direction. I think it can move in the direction that it needs to move for that person, for that individual. I'm not to say. It's not me.
Or not at all.
Or not at all. That's not for me to say. That's not for me
Or
to
also,
decide.
like what you're describing, though, sometimes the goalpost actually moves backwards, and that's okay too, because if you're maintaining consistency and you're maintaining that sort of basic level of strength, hopefully also with a little bit of, like Diego was saying, a little headroom to make things easier in our everyday life, but you need to do that for a period of time because things have gotten off the rails in your life.
Yeah.
But you're able to maintain consistency.
Yeah.
That's great. That's a great goal at that point in your life too.
It's that word. And that's Diego's word, consistency. I don't care what kind of
I
program.
thought his word was epistemological. How many words are you allowed to have?
He has a lot of words. But it is. But I think consistency really comes down to that, and we talk about that, and I've mentioned this many times in our programming lecture. The program, whatever it is, it can be dumb. If it's not that stupid, if it really isn't like completely off the rails, you will make progress if you are consistent. If you're consistent with whatever you're doing, change will occur. You will be successful for you. That means something different for somebody else, and that's okay. That's okay. It's, I think I obviously, we are a strength gym, so we push strength. But I try to, and when people come to me, they come because they say, I want to be stronger. I don't never get an email that just says, I don't know what you are, what kind of gym you are, but, I'm looking to most people, sometimes I get that rare email. Most people come, I want to be stronger. What can you do for me? How can you help me? And I give them, I talk about what we do and, and how we work with people, the program that we put them on. And I talk about my other program too, that also complements the strength program, because there is no one way and there's no one fit for somebody. We have people on various programs, all hopefully, that do now work for them. So, but, I know what we peddle. I think what we peddle is good, but most people come to us already with that in mind. It's reaching that person who doesn't know where to go. I think it's just starting somewhere is better than not starting at all.
One thing I would mention is to put our personal biases out in the open. I think all three of us are, I know you guys have talked about sort of process-oriented training versus goal-oriented training. And I would say the three of us are on the process end of the spectrum to some, to varying degrees. That is our bias. However, we have clients who are very goal-oriented.
Right.
And for them, it's different. I personally have been going to a gym of some variety or another multiple times a week for over 35 years.
Right.
Unfailingly.
Yeah.
So for me, obviously, I am a process-oriented person. Going to the gym and training is just what I do. But there are other people for whom that's not incentive enough or justification enough. They need something else. Some of those people need a competitive goal, so they end up competing in a strength or power sport, or they need a personal milepost to shoot for, and that's fine too, right? We have a process bias, and I think we have some justifications for why that is possibly better, but that is not to say that goal-oriented training isn't the right thing for some people.
Right. And I think that I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of my clients who honestly just having a training log is the reason it helps them get to the gym. The fact that they know there's a program, they have a program, they don't just mindlessly go, because that's the problem too, right? People just go to the gym, they don't know what to do. So then they never end up going because they don't have anything when they walk in the door. There's no A, B, C, D, like in a guided class where you have an instructor telling you what to do. There's people who like to take class and those who don't need a class, they just really don't know what to do. So having a training log, because I have many clients who have no necessarily any goals, right? Their goal is to get to the gym. And the fact that they have that book is very important to them. And they come up to me and they have it all written down and they want to make sure that they have everything in order before they begin. That helps them stay engaged and stay consistent, having that log. So I really do, I like that about the program and the training methodology that we use, where we do keep track. And I was explaining this to a new person she wasn't happy with what she was doing somewhere else. So she's going to start with us next week. And I said, everybody has a logbook and you keep track of what you're doing. You can literally physically and see also when you write this down in your book that you have made progress. Having that is good enough for some people to really be able to like look through, because people look through their training log constantly, look back to where they were 5 months ago, look where they are now. It really motivates them. So that's their motivation, not just a number, but the fact that they can literally see their progress as well as feel it. That helps them keep coming back. It gives them something to work towards, and they know that it's always going to be there.
I guess the thing I'm wondering about now then too, though, like with your clients who are more outcome oriented, right? Like we're all saying, any of the three of us feel pretty good about just showing up and doing the thing. And we've got no real issue moving our goalposts around because it's more about the act of lifting or the act of going to the gym, exercising, whatever that is. But like, I wonder if moving the goalposts or determining where to place the goalposts is more of a challenge for people who are more outcome oriented, because the idea of making progress, the way it's initially measured in the NLP is progress always is weight on the bar. So if that isn't the thing that's continually moving forward, if it moves backward, that's a harder adjustment. Like I'm also thinking about Ripito had an article a little while back about he was maintaining, and he was I didn't read the whole article, so it's not fair for me to comment, right? I sort of looked at I read the follow-up article that Sully wrote.
Okay.
Right. So there was an article that Rip wrote that was about he was maintaining and sort of asserting that he was allowed to maintain as opposed to progress because he's an old guy. And Sully's argument was, if you are staving off the effects of aging and gravity and so on and so forth by maintaining, that's still training. That's not nothing. That's not something to like just sneeze at. And it sort of, I wonder if people who are more outcome oriented have a harder time with figuring out where to place the goalposts, or if the goalposts seem to be in the same place for, an extended period of time, or if they even need to, pull them back a little bit. Like, what do you guys see with your outcome oriented lifters?
I think that they have a harder time. They're exactly what you just described. They have a harder time sticking with it if the goal is not met. I think they're harder on themselves if the goal is not met. The sense of personal failure, I think, is much higher. At least that's what I've observed. Which is, I think, in part why we tend to think that being more focused on the process in the long term yields better outcomes than being overly focused on the goals themselves. Of course, that doesn't work if you're a competitive powerlifter. The goal is the goal.
But it can change. We have a client, and he listens to this podcast, who was very, very concerned with outcome, with numbers, and was getting very frustrated with himself, discouraged because those numbers, he wasn't hitting those numbers. And he was consistent. Consistency wasn't the issue, but it was very difficult. It was very hard to encourage him, to keep him encouraged, because he was doing well. He was doing great, but he wasn't seeing those numbers. Then he had an injury that happened at work to his shoulder, kept him out for a couple of weeks. He didn't want to push it. He wanted to make sure he wasn't going to push it. After a few weeks, he started back. And we were very conservative, and I kept checking in with him about his shoulder. His focus changed from an outcome goal to just getting back into training again, right? And fine tuning his technique and his position, because he was so concerned about the shoulder, right? Where he was being very, very conservative with that, and we really moved very, very slowly, and he progressed very well, and he is beyond where he was the months before that shoulder issue, the shoulder, the injury. And the other day, hitting press PRs, hitting squat PRs now. His bench is heading through the roof now. And he's finally looking at his training as a process, it's as opposed to an outcome goal. There's no more thinking about the number on the bar. Now it's just a question of getting them there and continuing to just to kind of fine tune his technique and enjoy the process of training. Complete mind shift from one to the other. You also listen to our Expectations and Reality podcast, and that hit home. I think that's why that hit home a lot, and that kind of goes along with this. But it really has been a nice shift to see him think less about the outcome and more about the process, because he was getting discouraged, and I was getting worried that he wasn't going to stick with it because of that. And now he's making great progress. He was making great progress before. He's making even better progress now because of that mind shift. And I see that so clear. I've seen that clearly for about the past 2 months that he's been he's really been back in action, and it's wonderful to see because he's happy. I think he enjoys the training more now, than he did before, and consistency was never an issue. So that's a goal. That's a goal that shifted, not just so from outcome to process too. It's just a mindset, but also his ideas of where he should be. So that's nice to see. But Diego, those who are focused on outcome goals have a much harder time, and you have to deal with them differently.
Yeah, especially perfectionists with outcome goals.
Oh yeah. I convinced Kelly to do middleweight novice for the strong woman contest. I said, if you can do this without having to win or be in the open group, it might be good for you. She's like, I think I can, because she's that's who she is. She's not so much an outcome. But she's very competitive. She likes to be on her game, at the top of her game for anything. Yeah. Anything else that we want to add to this? Did we miss anything? We started talking about, did we talk about what success looks like? I don't know. I think success is that, you're still there. That your life is good.
Success is personal, right? Success for me, for food prep, is making enough food for us for the week. It's not being a Michelin star chef, right? I've defined success as that. So you get to define success for you any which way you want. Although I know that sounds wishy-washy and
no, but it isn't. No,
soft, but
it should be. I don't know what successful means to you. Success for me is that I could keep getting into the gym day in, day out, week in, week out, and feel good about the progress I've made, have a good quality of life, be able to help people who need my strength. That's success. Success success isn't a number for me. I know it's not a number for any of you, either, but that's because we're process oriented people. So success is very individual.
Yeah. And that's sometimes harder for people, right? Like, it's easier if somebody else gives you a definition.
Yeah.
Here's what success looks like, as opposed to, you need to go and be quiet and introspective and come up with your own answer. God, no. Sit by myself and think. Define for myself. Like, that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
No thanks. I'll just take your ready-made answer and the diet pill.
Yeah. No. That was pretty much his last, question there. What does success look like? It's different. It depends. There it is. It depends.
There you go.
I was able to squeeze it in. Didn't think I could do that.
Did we almost make it an entire podcast without "it depends," or did we already say that?
I just said it. I just said it. Well, I think that if we have nothing else to say, I think we pretty much have covered this topic. He will be very happy that we spend another hour discussing his
It's
email.
super fun talking with both of you. Diego, there was another question that Emily said you were somewhat interested in
Yes, there is.
participating in a discussion on.
Auto regulation.
I was interested
I
in
don't
the
know,
broader
that could be a
topic, yes.
trolling question.
It's not. It's not. It's
Well,
from
the question
it's
could be trolling, but the topic
it's
is
not.
valid.
It's from a listener. It's because he heard us say, send in your topics, and man, I got an email right away. It said, you have talked about RPE in your June.
That is a flagged topic.
In your June podcast. You've mentioned RPE multiple times.
That's why I'm saying
Have
I'm
you
interested
described
in
it?
auto regulation as a topic.
Exactly. Auto regulation. Which I say I do all the time to people. Warm up and see how you feel. Well, hit that single, and then if you decide you want to go up, we'll go up. And if that single feels like shit, then we're just going to stay where you are.
There you go. Success is auto-regulated.
I did that today. I did that today. I do that every day. Warm up and see how you feel. That's what it is. So yes, that's another topic that Diego says he wants to be on our podcast for. So I think it's going to become would you say Diego Radio, Rebecca?
No.
It's the summer of Diego.
No. This is it.
People are
Thank
excited.
you.
People
I
are
appreciate
excited.
the hospitality.
Our reviews are going to go through the roof. 5 stars.
And our vocabulary is improving.
Who did you have on that podcast? He was so wonderful.
Thank you for that, but I think you may be mistaken.
What?
And overly optimistic.
That you're going to be on for.
We need a sales
No,
pitch
that
has
your
a
reviews
personal
will be
and
positive.
emotional account, and then a plausible mechanism
I'm
to
surprised
get Diego
I
back
Yes.
on.
I know. I'm surprised I haven't seen a review yet. For the last podcast. But I guess people are understanding that we do want their questions. So hopefully we'll continue to get more.
And the reviews. You want the reviews.
Please, yes. If you for those who are listening, please leave us a review. It doesn't have to be a story. It can just be the 5 stars, or 4.5 if you choose to do 4.5. But please leave us a review. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. Yeah. So, I mean, we're at a bunch of places, and we were listed as one of the top 20 podcasts of 2021 to listen to.
You're kidding me.
No, from something.
Where did you see this?
Where was that?
This is success.
I sent it to.
This is how I'm defining success.
I think this is more likely a sales pitch, but.
Where is it? I sent it out when I send out my.
You sent it to your mom. That was the only person.
No.
Look, Mom.
My mom still won't listen. I think she's only vaguely aware that this exists.
Trainings. Yeah, I was sending with the training schedule. I got to find it, but it was some. I saw 5x3 top 21 podcast. I was like, what? We're listed. And what did you say, Diego? Something to the effect of, oh man, they'll list anything, or something to that effect. It was.
That sounds like me.
It was, yeah. It was kind of disappointing what he said. Oh, here it is.
Little splash of realism.
Blogfeedspot.com.
Interesting.
Feedspot home, and it said, oh, here says top 30 strength coach podcasts you must follow. 30. Okay, we're one of the 30. We were number
Probably 30.
number 17.
Oh.
We were number 17. We were right above big 6-figure strength coach in Canada. But we're ahead of Strength and Conditioning Journal podcast and the Hockey Strength podcast.
Pretty much right exactly where you belong.
Hey, that's not nice. Strength Chat by Kabuki Strength. We're ahead of them. They're in Oregon. So yeah, we were listed number 17. So people we're getting around. We're getting around. So we'll wrap it up there, everybody. And if you have questions, comments about anything that we've talked about, please always contact us. Emily at 5x3.com or Rebecca at
CornerstoneStrengthMaryland.com or Gmail.
And you can leave us a comment, or you can leave it, ask us a question. We'll probably be back in a couple weeks, and I guess we'll have Diego on again for our auto regulation topic.
Again?
Yeah, we'll have to. Again, let's just make it a summer thing, as Rebecca said. And then you can go back to not doing anything for the fall. But we've got a good...
Yeah, Diego, you don't do anything in the fall.
No, I usually hibernate.
Nothing.
Good thing to do.
And in a couple weeks, I will have I'll send out a link to our fundraising page for our Charm City Strong Woman contest, because that is coming up soon, September 12th. We have about 50
is there
women.
going to be a beer again?
What?
A custom beer again?
Yes, there is, the Volcana.
Is it coming back?
Yes, it's coming back. They're making tweaks to it, Dave said. So the Volcana will be back. 50 women so far registered. And
having Diego on improves your vocabulary.
Improves your vocabulary. I make up words. I'll have the fundraising page link with our podcast too. So if you would like to donate to the Almond House, you can make a donation. Thanks. We will be back in a couple weeks with our next topic, and we look forward to spending some time with you in about 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Diego.
Thanks, Diego.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thanks. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to 5x3 Radio with Emily and Rebecca. If you like our show and want to know more about 5x3 training, please visit us at www.5, that's F-I-V-E, the letter X, the number 3.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. To learn more about Rebecca, please visit her website, cornerstonestrengthmaryland.com. Thanks for listening and have a great week.